the world has just been rocked by whispers of a phone call so explosive it could shake the foundations of British politics. King Charles, Donald Trump, and Keir Starmer, three names suddenly tangled in a storm of power, betrayal, and raw political drama. This wasn't a polite exchange behind palace doors. This was a conversation that has stunned London, rattled Washington, and left Britain asking one terrifying question: has the election already been decided before the people even vote? It began with what seemed like an ordinary moment. Keir Starmer, Britain's embattled Prime Minister, reaching out for reassurance as the election campaign turns darker by the day. His government is under siege, collapsing approval ratings, an angry public furious over immigration and the cost of living, and Nigel Farage rising fast in the polls. Starmer desperately needed a lifeline, a sign that the Crown and Washington still stood with him. But what he got instead was a shockwave. Reports leaked that Starmer's call reached not only King Charles, but also Donald Trump, who was patched in without warning. What unfolded was no ordinary diplomatic exchange. It was a brutal reminder of where power truly lies. And it wasn't with Starmer. Imagine the scene. A tired Prime Minister hoping to project confidence, suddenly hearing Trump's unmistakable voice cut through the line. Not words of support, not promises of unity, but sharp, mocking questions about Britain's future and Starmer's own weakness. Trump, with his trademark smirk audible even through the phone, reportedly told Starmer he had failed the British people, and went further by suggesting that Nigel Farage, not the sitting Prime Minister, was the real voice of Britain. The silence that followed was crushing. Even King Charles, normally restrained to the point of invisibility in politics, was said to have paused, the weight of Trump's words hanging like a sword over the conversation. For Starmer, the call was a nightmare. He had walked straight into a trap. Not only was his authority challenged live on a secure line, but it happened in front of the monarch, the symbolic heart of Britain. The optics could not be worse. The king forced to hear his prime minister humiliated, Trump delivering the blows, and Farage being elevated as Britain's chosen man in Washington. Within hours of the leak, political circles in London were ablaze. Did King Charles quietly agree with Trump's brutal assessment? Did the monarch remain silent as Trump mocked his own prime minister? No one can say for sure, but the lack of denial from the palace is already fueling the fire. The timing could not be more devastating. Britain is entering one of the most unpredictable elections in modern history. Starmer's Labour government, once confident of victory, now faces not only a resurgent Conservative opposition, but also a reform UK movement supercharged by Trump's open endorsement of Farage. And now this phone call, this whispered moment behind closed doors, has become a public weapon. Every headline screams the same chilling truth. If Trump trusts Farage more than Starmer, what does that mean for Britain's future? Investors are already jittery, allies are nervous, and voters are left wondering if their Prime Minister has already lost before ballots are even cast. This was no ordinary call. It was a seismic moment that may have redrawn the map of British politics. Starmer thought he was seeking reassurance. Instead, he stumbled into humiliation of the highest order, with King Charles forced to witness it all. The fallout is only beginning, and the election has never looked more uncertain. The fallout from that phone call is spreading like wildfire, and the deeper people dig, the darker the story becomes. Political insiders in London are already calling it the most humiliating moment of Starmer's career. A disaster not on television this time, but whispered from palace walls and amplified into a storm that refuses to die. What makes it so destructive is not just Trump's words, but the fact that King Charles himself was on the line. For centuries, the British monarch has remained above the raw brawl of politics, careful never to show favouritism or judgment. But the very idea that the king sat silently while Donald Trump dismantled his prime minister's authority is enough to send shivers through Westminster. Did the monarch intervene? Did he defend his government, or did his silence give weight to Trump's attack? Nobody knows, and the palace's refusal to deny the account is making the speculation worse. For Starmer, it paints a brutal picture. A leader mocked by Washington and watched in silence by his own crown. The timing could not be more catastrophic. The election is weeks away, Reform UK is climbing fast in the polls, and Conservative MPs smell blood in the water. Already they are accusing Starmer of being the weakest Prime Minister in living memory, a man so irrelevant that the King and the White House treat him like a ghost. Reform UK is moving even faster, plastering the story across their platforms, boasting that Farage has the ear of Trump, while Starmer cannot even secure respect on his own soil. The message is devastatingly simple. If America's most powerful voice trusts Farage more than Starmer, why should Britain's people do otherwise? Financial markets are twitching, the pound dipping again as investors fear instability. Analysts warn that if Trump returns to power in Washington, London's fate may already be sealed, and that fate does not include Keir Starmer at the table. The shock is not just political, it is cultural. For decades, Britain prided itself on the so-called special relationship, a bond unshakable no matter which leaders were in charge. Now that bond is being tested in ways unseen since World War II, and this time the fracture feels personal. To many watching, it looks as though Britain's Prime Minister has lost the confidence not only of America, but perhaps even of his own king. The ripple effects are tearing through the election campaign like a storm. Starmer's rivals are sharpening their knives, the public is restless, and the haunting question grows louder with each passing hour. Is the Prime Minister already finished before a single vote has been cast? As the shockwaves continue, Westminster is sinking into chaos, and the atmosphere feels more like the build-up to a coup than a routine election campaign. Starmer's team is scrambling, leaking carefully worded statements, insisting the call was constructive, and that relations with both the Crown and America remain unshakable. But no one is buying it. Even sympathetic media outlets are struggling to defend him, because the story is too explosive, too vivid, too humiliating to bury. Opposition MPs are circling like vultures, each day delivering sharper blows in Parliament, painting Starmer as a man stripped of dignity on the world stage. Conservative voices are calling the alleged silence of King Charles a deafening verdict, while Reform UK is practically dancing in the streets, using the moment as proof that Nigel Farage, not Starmer, holds the respect of America's most powerful political figure. The story has become unstoppable, spreading across every front page and dominating every talk show. Analysts warn that what is unfolding is bigger than one election. It is the reordering of Britain's place in the world. Foreign capitals are quietly recalibrating. Paris and Berlin are openly testing whether Britain is still relevant as a partner. NATO insiders whisper that London could lose its privileged seat at the table if Washington truly freezes out Starmer. Intelligence officials, once confident in the deep trust between the US and UK, are now murmuring that sensitive information may slow to a trickle if Trump believes Britain's leadership is compromised. All of this while ordinary voters watch a Prime Minister unravel in real time, mocked abroad and cornered at home. For many in Britain, the humiliation feels personal, a national embarrassment that touches every citizen. The image of Starmer, caught between Trump's mocking voice and the silent weight of King Charles, is replaying again and again, burning into the public imagination as the symbol of weakness and lost respect. And as polling firms release new numbers, the disaster is plain to see. Labour's support slipping, Reform UK surging, the Conservatives regaining strength. It is no longer a question of whether Starmer can recover, but whether his leadership will collapse before voters even reach the ballot box. The crisis has reached a breaking point, and the shadows surrounding that fateful call with King Charles and Donald Trump are beginning to consume everything in British politics. What started as whispers has now hardened into a narrative that Keir Starmer cannot escape. A Prime Minister humiliated in front of his king, dismissed by America's most dominant political force, and overshadowed by a rival who has never even held the office. The danger for Starmer is not only the loss of credibility abroad, but the collapse of authority at home. Inside his own party, Labour MPs are panicking. Some are openly questioning his leadership behind closed doors, fearing that the election is already slipping through their fingers. They whisper that the humiliation was inevitable, that Starmer foolishly gambled by antagonising Trump in the past, and that the Prime Minister is now paying the price for years of mockery and disdain. The sense of betrayal is suffocating, because Starmer was meant to be the man who restored stability after years of chaos. Instead, he now looks weaker, more vulnerable, and more isolated than any of his predecessors. His opponents know this, and they are exploiting it ruthlessly. Conservatives are hammering him daily, portraying him as a leader abandoned even by his king. Reform UK has weaponised the call into a campaign slogan, holding up Nigel Farage as the man who carries Washington's respect, while Starmer carries only London's shame. The image is powerful, devastating, and impossible to fight. Beyond Britain's borders, the reaction is just as chilling. In Europe, leaders are reassessing their strategies, with France openly moving to present itself as Trump's new favoured ally, and Germany quietly preparing for a future where Britain is no longer the bridge across the Atlantic. In Canada and Australia, longtime partners of the UK, officials admit privately that if Trump freezes London out, their own relationships with Britain may suffer. This is not just a political embarrassment, it is a tectonic shift in alliances. For decades, Britain's global power has rested on its ability to influence Washington. If that thread is cut, Britain risks becoming an isolated island, sidelined in the very world order it once helped to build. Financial markets sense the danger. Investors are pulling back, the pound is wobbling, and businesses are bracing for the possibility that future trade deals could evaporate overnight. NATO insiders are warning that Britain's credibility has been shattered, and that the alliance could fracture if London is no longer seen as America's closest partner. The implications for national security are staggering. Intelligence cooperation, military planning, and defence contracts worth billions all hang in the balance, and one leaked phone call has thrown it all into doubt. Meanwhile, the public is seething. Polls show growing anger not just at Starmer's perceived weakness, but at the idea that Britain itself has been humiliated. The story has taken on a life of its own, spreading far beyond the facts, morphing into a symbol of national decline. On social media, the images and quotes from the alleged call are replayed endlessly, fueling outrage and despair. Protesters are beginning to gather outside Parliament, demanding answers from the Prime Minister, demanding to know why their country was reduced to silence in the face of Trump's mockery. The mood is turning poisonous, and once that poison spreads, it is almost impossible to contain. Every step Starmer takes now is haunted by the call, every speech overshadowed by Trump's voice and the King's silence. No matter what he says, it sounds hollow, defensive, irrelevant. His opponents can afford to sit back and watch him sink, because the narrative writes itself. Britain's Prime Minister is no longer respected abroad, no longer trusted at home, and no longer capable of leading his nation through a storm. And then comes the most terrifying question of all. Was this humiliation merely the beginning? Insiders close to Trump's circle whisper that more is coming, that the phone call was only the first step in a calculated strategy to dismantle Britain's standing and elevate allies who pledge personal loyalty to him. If that is true, then the future holds even deeper humiliation, not just for Starmer, but for the entire country. Imagine the scale of the shift. Britain, once America's first call, reduced to a secondary player, forced to beg for scraps of attention while others seized the role it once commanded. Already, Farage is boasting of further conversations with Trump, promising that Reform UK will deliver the partnership Starmer has failed to secure. His supporters cheer louder each day, energised by the belief that Britain can only be great again if it aligns with Trump's vision. For Starmer, this is the nightmare scenario. Fighting not only against his traditional the storm that began with one shocking phone call is now threatening to become a full-blown political earthquake. And the epicentre is not just Keir Starmer, it is Britain itself. The narrative has escaped the control of politicians, journalists, and even the palace. It now belongs to the people, who are asking in louder and louder voices whether their country has been reduced to a pawn in Donald Trump's power game. In pubs, in workplaces, on street corners, ordinary citizens are debating the meaning of that call. Some see it as a betrayal, others as a warning, and many as proof that the man who calls himself Prime Minister has lost the respect of both Washington and his own monarchy. And in the middle of this rising fury stands Starmer, looking smaller by the day, overshadowed by Nigel Farage's growing momentum and haunted by the image of a king who did not or would not defend him. The sense of inevitability is suffocating, and it is spreading across every layer of British society. In Westminster, the panic is palpable. Labour MPs are fracturing under the pressure, with whispers of rebellion filling the corridors. Some are already discussing what happens after Starmer, convinced that his days are numbered whether he survives the election or not. Conservatives smell opportunity and are preparing to frame themselves as the party that can restore Britain's pride. Reform UK is moving even faster, with Farage using every rally, every interview, every post to remind the nation that Trump singled him out as the true voice of Britain. The phrase is becoming a mantra, repeated endlessly until it feels less like commentary and more like prophecy. Starmer, meanwhile, is trapped in a nightmare loop. Every attempt to fight back is drowned out by the echo of Trump's mockery and the silence of King Charles. The international stage is no kinder. Reports from Washington suggest Trump's allies are preparing to freeze London out of early policy talks. A devastating blow that would leave Britain scrambling for influence, while rivals like France rush to fill the void. NATO officials admit privately that they no longer know if Britain will be treated as a central player, or if Trump will sideline it in favour of leaders he deems more loyal. European capitals are recalculating, businesses are hesitating, and investors are quietly moving money out of Britain in anticipation of turbulence. Even the intelligence community is nervous, warning that the perception of a rift could damage the flow of critical information. For decades, Britain's strength has been built on trust with America, a trust that now looks cracked, fragile, and ready to break. But the most dangerous impact is not in boardrooms or military briefings, it is in the hearts of voters. Britain's public, weary of years of political chaos, had hoped for stability. Instead, they are watching their leader unravel under the weight of humiliation. The anger is turning raw, personal, and unpredictable. Protesters are not just demanding answers from Starmer, they are demanding dignity for Britain itself. The election campaign is no longer about policies or manifestos. It has become a referendum on respect. Who commands it, who has lost it, and who can restore it? Every image of Trump praising Farage is replayed as evidence that the Prime Minister has been replaced in the eyes of the world. Every silence from the palace is interpreted as quiet disapproval, and every stumble by Starmer feeds the belief that his time is already over. Now the countdown to election day feels less like democracy in action and more like the final act of a slow-motion collapse. Will the humiliation define Britain for a generation? Will Farage ride the wave of Trump's approval straight into unprecedented political power? And will Starmer be remembered not as the man who led Britain forward, but as the Prime Minister who was undone by a single phone call that changed everything? One truth is already clear. The echoes of that conversation between King Charles, Donald Trump, and Keir Starmer will not fade. They will haunt this election, this country, and perhaps even the future of the special relationship itself. The question is no longer whether Britain has been humiliated. The question is whether it can ever recover.